Welcome, my friends, to City Art Connections. This is the second annual City Art Connections 2020, the year of the pandemic. And so obviously there had to be some adjustments made to this opening, this year's show. A lot of interesting artists. We're doing a virtual opening, so nobody's in here but yours truly and the artwork of all the artists. And what I'm going to do is take you through this year's exhibition. Just show it to you, talk a little bit about the artists and their work. And if you're just joining us, if you've never heard of City Art Connections, I started it because I wanted to give artists in different cities a chance to talk with each other and network and get to know each other and what each other is doing in their respective cities. This year and last year we're both in Michigan, so if you think of the different cities where the artists are from or based in as people, I like the idea of thinking of, like, say, Ann Arbor talking to Detroit, or Detroit talking to Grand Rapids, or Kalamazoo talking to Lansing. Like, we all get so into sort of creating or cultivating strong arts communities in our cities and in our neighborhoods, which is totally understandable. But there's another element that we could explore, which is neighboring cities or other cities where you can collaborate or network or share things or learn about what's happening in other cities, other communities, and become a part of that. And, you know, through those interactions, like if we have a normal opening in a normal year, the artists are all here and they're talking and they get to know each other, and then pretty soon relationships form and friendships and collaborations can bloom from that. So that's the point of City Art Connections. Quick shout out to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Battle Creek Community Foundation for sponsoring this show and the Art Center of Battle Creek. Wouldn't be possible without them. This has been a really difficult year for pulling things together, but we've adjusted, and when you have that kind of support, it makes things a lot easier, so thank you to them. Let me give you a quick turnaround. I'll turn the camera around and give you a quick look of the gallery overall before we get into the works of the artists. So we are in the Record Box Loft in downtown Battle Creek. Beautiful space. And we've got all the works in the gallery here. About half a dozen artists displaying works from or based in cities like Detroit to Grand Rapids and Battle Creek. Couldn't squeeze everything in, of course, but quite a big space. And we've got a nice video back there. I like video to have their own space. As a curator, I like to give things space to breathe. This, for me, this is even maybe a little too close. It's close, but I think it's important to give each work its own room to sort of open the space for interaction, for a lengthier interaction. So I don't like to stack things on top. So I got as many works as I could, and let's go through the works one by one. We'll start on one end and go through it. So the first works we're going to look at are by Kayce Gifford, and let me get a quick shot of her details right here so you can look that up. We have 3 works. They're all untitled, so as to avoid making assumptions about sex or gender or ethnicity. Just appreciate the beings and the lines on their own. And it's on plywood with matte acrylic marker. As she describes this on her site, that the way she uses the marker and the sort of the elements contained within, it's kind of like simplicity in a good way, keeping gestures simple, but in a way that where less is more, and that these lines, she says, are sort of like a reflection of early cave drawings, which I can totally see. course, I'd like to spend a lot of time in front of each works. That's the way I do it in a museum. I wouldn't even get to all these in a museum probably, because I would stand in front and talk with somebody about it. But for the purposes of this video, you can go back and watch this as many times as you like and pause it. I'm going to roll through these at a pace that's a little bit quicker than what I'm used to. All right, so the next works, I would like to do mine last, but I just happen to be next, so we'll go with geography here. Here is my information, so you can check that out. I work in a lot of different mediums: video, sound, light, and painting. And sometimes I combine them. This is the first time I've ever tried to do lights on canvas, which I really like. I think there's something here for me to experiment with. And you can actually see there's acrylic, there's pencil and other materials as well. Pencil marks. It's another thing that I've been doing with paintings lately. And these lights are interesting to work with. They're meant to be sort of like neon-esque, but obviously neon is beautiful, but it's expensive. And one of these days. But I look forward to experimenting more with this type of work. Now, experimenting for the second one, I wanted to do something that was almost monochromatic, but I couldn't resist the quintessential Troy circle down there, the black circle. But I love monochromaticism. And yellow has been finding its way into my works more and more. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's subconscious. But I also like, and this is something that you can see more in this work, where I'm experimenting with painting a little bit more with the layers. Like, I like putting layers on top of layers and then leaving gaps where you can see things underneath. Even if the lights weren't on this, that's still how a painting of mine would probably look. I love that idea because we're not just existing in the moment. You're watching this in whatever year and whatever month. You're not just existing that day. You're layered yourself from yesterday and the day before. All those layers shine through. You're an aggregate of all the days of yourself. And so that's what that's the way I like to paint. And you can see, actually, this is a good shot. I even been able to see, there are different colored yellows on here. So I layered the same color, but just different shades of the same color on here, which doesn't always come through. I think with, this is a beautiful space, but in like a museum, the lighting would be so that you would probably see that. It would be a little more prominent. But these are the two works of mine for this City Art Connections 2020. Okay. All right, Pete Larouche is the next artist. He's got 3 paintings, 3 large canvas here. There's Pete's work. Pete and I were talking a lot about abstractions when he dropped these off. We love improvisation and abstractions. That's what I got from Pete. And I was telling him that I like abstractions because it's at the edge of all that we know and we don't know. So, non-representational stuff. Representational stuff obviously can be beautiful as well, but for the abstractions, you're inventing things that didn't exist before, and especially if you trust yourself and do move quickly and avoid paralysis by analysis, which can really sink you. Who knows what you can come up with. And Pete also mentioned that he uses house paints, not just, there's a mix of different things on here. There's a nice little shine to it. Must be, I can't remember what he said he used to finish these works, but really interesting to use house paints, practical as well. And this is his 3rd painting in the show. This is the largest canvas of his, and I think it's the largest canvas in the show. A lot of bright colors on this exhibition. All right, so we have Sue Trowbridge. Sue does a lot of different works. Like I've seen her do shows with a lot of abstract works, and she gave me 2 sets, and I just sort of grabbed what I could put up, and I have a set of 3 there. There's one in the middle there, and then these 3 seem to go together with the horses, the beautiful horses here with such an interesting color and glow to them. And oh, by the way, here's Sue's information if you want to check her out, send her an email or inquire about anything. Again, I'd love to stay in front of these for a lot longer, but you can always rewind these or pause these. Interesting that there are, I've said this before, but it does remind me, like a lot of it, especially the ones over here with the glowing, reminds me of the Fantasia animals a little bit. But there are, in some pages there are 3 horses, some there are 2. So depending on which way you arrange these, and I arrange these in just a subconscious way, but a horse is plussed or subtracted at some point in the movement here.
Meanwhile, Fox and Good Shooter flew to New Orleans. Above the clouds, Fox sketched something she saw in a dream, while Good Shooter poured her.
And the final 3 works here. Lots of bright colors in Sue's work.
As soon as Fox and Good Shooter landed in New Orleans,
Makes you feel warm
the shooters checked
in a good way.
in New Orleans and Oslo. While exploring New Orleans, Shooter discovered a beautiful apartment. After spending all day wondering if he could ever find Fox alive,
And the final work that we have is Foxy News, which is a book by The Moon, which is Mark Andrus and Natalie Wetzel. And I can get to their information here before we watch a little bit of this.
I'm right in the middle of.
There we go. Now, what we're experiencing in this exhibition, the book in video form. Now, it's being read, narrated, there's music of the book, and so we're seeing the book itself, but we're also hearing music and hearing narration. So it's an interesting combination of a work that already has a lot of interesting combinations.
Fox confided in Shooter.
So let's just listen for a moment. There's a story here that I'll get into a little bit.
Give me some truth. The 2 decided to continue their conversation through the streets of New Orleans. At Café du Monde, they shared beignets and chicory coffee. Shooter was quite taken by Fox. Enjoying their stroll through the French Quarter, Fox swooned.
So if you go to the website, what you'll see is a description where it talks about this is a book that introduces physics through the arts, and they do mention a feeling of a children's book, but it's applicable to all ages because they end up talking about focusing on illustrating quantum non-locality, using the arts, using photography, sculpture, costuming, creative writing. There's politics, there's a love story, a blending of art and science in an accessible manner. And you know that it's accessible to different age groups because one of the questions on there is what are the parallels, if any, between photonic and emotional entanglement? And referring to non-locality before, I mentioned that it refers to the idea that one photon can exist in 2 places simultaneously. So that's kind of the idea of the story. Really interesting concept of 2 things being able to exist. And if you read the book, if you go to themoongr.com and you get a chance to get your hands on a copy of the book, it's a really interesting story about beings existing in 2 places simultaneously. So it's sort of an interesting, critical thinking type concept told through beautiful photos. And let's just thumb through a few of these photos here because they're really beautiful. Beautifully shot, great story, great costumes. I've said this many times, but it reminds me of, in opera they have something called the Gesamtkunstwerk, the totality of the arts, where you have all these things coming together. Fashion and theater and music and dance and story and writing and all that. So really interesting combination. Okay, that's it for the City Art Connections 2020 second annual show. Thanks so much for joining. You can go to arthouse43.com and you can click on City Art Connections. There's a logo at the top left. You can find the website, links to all the artists, send them an inquiry, become pen pals, buy some work, tell them how much you liked it. Once again, a shout out to W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Battle Creek Community Foundation, Art Center Battle Creek. Couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Troy Ramos, and I will see you on the next event.